Hello, hello. So question number 3, our student, and this we will go through the question number D. State the color of the solid form in step 2. So step 2 involves the reaction between the sodium sulfate and barium chloride. So we already saw here in the part A, there was a formation of barium sulfate as a product. One of the product was barium sulfate. Now the color of the barium sulfate must be mentioned here in D part. And we remember it is basically a white precipitate. This is a white precipitate. So we just write white because we do not need to write the form of the product. It's just the white. Then E part, the mixture is filtered in step 3. State the general term given to a solid left in the filter paper after the filtration. So we must remember whenever filtration is done using the conical funnel, anything which is left behind in this conical funnel is the residue. So this is what we write here, residue. Then F part, the actual mass of dry barium sulfate collected in step 4 is greater than the expected mass. This is because the student should do an addition step between step 3 and 4. Suggest what the student should do. So coming back to this step, what we learned here, step 3 was supposedly stir the mixture and then filter it, and step 4, dry the solid left in the filter paper. So stirring is just for mixing the two solution, and step 4 is to dry the mixture. It does not involve separation of the two products here. We remember in the part A, the other product was sodium chloride, and this sodium chloride is definitely there in the mixture because we are stirring the mixture now, which is actually the product. We can say mixture is the mixture of the two products. So step 4 is just drying the mixture. It does not say, it does not state anywhere where the these two products are separated from each other. So barium sulfide and sodium chloride. This one is totally solid and undissolved, insoluble, and sodium chloride is an aqueous form which is soluble in water. So we need to separate these two compounds from each other. So the separation must be mentioned here. We need to suggest what the student should do in this additional step. We will say we rinse the mixture, rinse a mixture with distilled water, or more precisely, with cold distilled water, and also explain why the actual mass was greater than the expected mass. We can say sodium chloride was also present in the mixture, was also present in the mixture. For this reason, the mass of the mixture collected, or the mass of dry BaSO4 collected, was greater than the expected mass. It's just not BaSO4. Be mindful, it also has NaCl present. Then G part, state the name of this method of salt preparation. We are basically forming the barium sulfate, which is a precipitate compound. So the method involved in making the precipitate is simply called precipitation. The salt which is being formed here is insoluble salt and we represent as precipitate. So that's why the method involved is called precipitation. So we write here precipitation. Then H part, state the name of a different barium salt that can be used in place of the barium chloride. Since we are using a soluble salt that reacts with the other salt here, sodium sulfate, we need to use any other kind of a barium salt that must be soluble. It must be aqueous and it is a salt of barium. So we can have barium nitrate, BaNO3 whole twice. This is a formula. And the question, it says the name. So we write the name here, barium nitrate. Then sulfate salt that can be used in place of the sodium sulfate. So just like sodium sulfate is a soluble salt, we can use any other salt that can be soluble in water. We can have we can have potassium sulfate. Or we can have ammonium sulfate. Both of them are actually soluble salts of the sulfate. And the third point, barium salt that can be made by this method. So what kind of salt uh, will be formed by this method, which is precipitation? We know precipitation method is, they mean to say here. So what kind of barium salt that can be formed other than the barium sulfate using this method? Barium sulfate was one such salt that was insoluble, but we need to name any other salt of a barium that should be insoluble that is formed through precipitation. So one such kind of a salt could be barium carbonate, because barium carbonate is also insoluble. It is insoluble, just like BSO4, and we remember the rules of solubility of salts from the literature. So we write the name here, barium carbonate. Barium carbonate is formed. Now question 4, nitric acid and sulfuric acid are strong acids. Ethanoic acid is a weak acid. 1 mole of each acid is added separately to 1000 cm³ distilled water to form a dilute solution. All three acids dissociate in distilled water. State the formula of the common cation produced when each of the three acids dissociate in water. Okay, so what is the name of that ion that is formed when these acids are added into the water? And that's just one such ion, that is hydrogen ion. Because whenever acid is dissolved in water, it produces the hydrogen ion. And you need to write the formula. So this is the formula. Then second part, explain in terms of dissociation why nitric acid described as a strong acid. So nitric acid is a strong acid because the definition must be used here. The definition of a strong acid, which means any acid which is completely dissolved or dissociated or dissolved. That is the definition of the strong acids. So we write here completely dissociates. And by the word dissociate, we mean the compound converts or breakdowns into its respective ions. So like HNO3 will dissociate into hydrogen ions and the nitrate ions. This is what it means. And ethanoic acid describes the weak acid. Why is that so? Because we would say it is incompletely dissociates or incompletely or partially dissociates. Again, the same principle about dissociation. Then the third state, which of the three acids will have highest pH value? So with respect to the pH, we are already familiar. A value which is less than 7 is termed acid. A value greater than 7 is termed basic. And value equivalent to 7 is termed neutral. And also we remember the ranges. The range which is just closer to 7 but less than 7. Closer to 7, less than 7 but closer to it. That means 6, 5, 4. This range is definitely of the acidic range but weakly acidic. This is the range of weakly acidic. And any value which is just greater than 7 but closer to 7. For example, 8, 9, 10, 11. These value will belong to weak alkaline. Weak alkaline nature. So which of the three will have the highest pH value? By that we mean it would be an acid, but the value will be highest. That indicates the weakest acid. Weakest acid. Value is less than 7, but value is highest among the three acids. And these are three acids: nitric, sulfuric, and ethanoic. They already termed nitric acid is a strong acid and ethanoic acid is a weak acid. And sulfuric acid is also, you should be familiar with the knowledge that sulfuric acid is also a strong acid. You cannot regard it as weak acid. It is also a strong acid. So the only acid left among the three which has a highest pH value will be the ethanoic acid. Then 4, state the color of thiamolphthalene in all the three dilute acids. For this purpose, we must refer to the literature, what we learned about the color of the three indicators in the course. This one, thiamolphthalene course, is included in the syllabus, and color mentioned in the acidic nature is colorless, in the neutral is also colorless, but in alkali it's blue. So we have the colorless situation in the dilute acid, colorless. Then part 5, give the formula of the anion formed when sulfuric acid dissociates in water. So just like I mentioned the equation for the nitric acid, I need to write similar equation for the dissociation of sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is H2SO4. So when it dissociate, you will represent the arrows. The arrow direction can be in both directions, or it could be as one direction, but for strong acid we usually put just one direction of the arrow, so it will convert into one more thing. They are asking you to write the formula of the anion. For the convenience, I'm going to write the full dissociation of the acid, that is formation of 2 moles of the hydrogen ions and 1 mole of the sulfate ion, all because we know the formula of sulfuric acid H2SO4, it has 2 hydrogen atoms in it. So for this reason we balance by using 2 hydrogen ions along with a sulfate ion. But the question is demanding for the formula of only the anion, and anion is a negative ion here, which in this case is sulfate ion. So you do not have to write the whole equation, you just represent the anion. And for this reason, I will write only anion in the next part. So ethanoic acid associated in water. So what should we remember? We should remember the ethanoic acid has this formula CH3COOH, and when it associates, hydrogen ion will be liberated, and as a result, the formation of anion would be CH3COO negative. So this is the formula CH3COO negative. This anion is formed. Part 6 says, name the 2 gaseous products formed during the electrolysis of dilute sulfuric acid using inert electrode. This was basically the topic of the electrochemistry, which we already covered in our previous session of 4 chapters. But even then, let's remember that dilute sulfuric acids will have water and sulfuric acid. So through both the cases, H2SO4 and H2O both have the hydrogen ions present. So that's why the gaseous product form will be the hydrogen gas through the hydrogen ions, and the other one will be the oxygen gas through the hydroxide ions. Hydroxide ions produces the oxygen gas on the electrode. Then 7 part, name the salt form when calcium reacts with ethanoic acid. You need to name the salt. So this is ethanoic acid, CH3COOH, and this is calcium. So we remember there is always the formation of a salt plus hydrogen gas as a reaction of the metal with acid. So the salt in this case will be a combination of this Ca and displacement of the hydrogen. So CH3 COO Ca, but Ca is an element of group 2, which means it has a valency of 2. So for this reason, the anion will have 2 molecules because calcium has valency of 2. We remember this formula making that Ca is plus 2 and CH3 COO negative is minus 1. That's why this is the correct formula. Then B part, aluminum nitrate is made when dilute nitric acid reacts with aluminum hydroxide. Aluminum hydroxide acts as a base in this reaction. Define the term base. So base is anything which accepts the protons, H plus. That is a base. Aluminum hydroxide is not an alkali. State what this tells you about the solubility of aluminum hydroxide. It means that aluminum hydroxide is not soluble in water. If it is not soluble in water, it means it is working as a base only, not as an alkali. So insoluble. The aluminum hydroxide is not soluble because soluble bases are called alkalis. Soluble base is termed as alkali, but this is not soluble. Name one other compound which forms aluminum nitrate when added to dilute nitric acid. So in the question they said aluminum nitrate was formed when dilute nitric acid reacted with the aluminum hydroxide, AlOH3. So other than aluminum hydroxide, which other aluminum compound can be reactive with a dilute nitric acid? Since this is an acid, HNO3, we need to react it with a base. Acid must react with a base to form the salt. Salt is the aluminum nitrate. This is salt. So the only left product, the only left reactant, the only remaining reactant that can be reacted with the nitric acid could be aluminum oxide, Al2O3, because this is also working as a base when reacted with the nitric acid. Otherwise, aluminum oxide is amphoteric, but it becomes base for in front of strong acid, and it becomes acid in front of the strong base. So we write the name. So aluminum oxide is the name. Aluminum oxide. The part 4 is not included in our revision of the chapters. So that's it. We have done the related questions of this paper. So students, if you have any question related to this paper, you can let me know. And stay tuned for the more papers coming on the way. And if you require my notes of the whole IGCSE syllabus, you can reach me out on my WhatsApp or Instagram. So that's it. That's all for today, students. Till our next class, take care and Allah Hafiz.